Well, join me in welcoming Vincent.
Thank you, everybody. So since I have a French accent, I will try to speak slowly and loudly, thanks to the speaker. So first of all, I have like a printout. You're welcome to grab one. So the first half is about cutworms, so how to identify them, scout for them, control them. And the second half is about beneficial insects, so with some nice pictures. So if you don't remember everything I talk about today, you can always go back to the printout. So it's pretty nice. So here I have a certain number of insects in petri dishes. And so I will talk about each group and hand you the petri dishes in the same time so you can actually see the insects while I talk about them. If you have trouble seeing them, you can actually put the petri dish on top of a sheet of paper, and with a white background, it's going to show up way nicer. So first of all, I would like to hand you some insects which are very common and very good beneficial in the field. Yeah, thanks. I'll give you half of them. You can just pass them around. Okay, so try to have a look at them, and hopefully, so in each petri dish is the same thing, so you can just pass them around so everyone can see. Okay. Do any of you know what those insects are? It's one of the first insects you learned about when you grew up as a kid. Yeah, thank you. So those are ladybird beetle larvae. So a lot of people don't know that. So they look like small alligators, that we say. So they will actually be very voracious and eat a lot of aphids, as well as other insects, like tiny caterpillars and such. So please learn to recognize them. This is one of the most common insects, and a lot of people have trouble to identify them. And so talking about beneficials, so why do we talk about beneficials? First of all, is because they save us time and money if we know how to recognize them, so we don't have to go in the field and do something if there are a lot of beneficials already. So there are different types of beneficials. So the one group will be a group that will kill pests, so either eat them or parasitize them, that will eventually kill them. We have also pollinators, and we also have decomposers like dung beetles, which are also somewhat important. And so then, if you have a field, so you have different insects on the ground, on the plant, and flying above. So flying above, you will have some predaceous flies, for example, that will fly and catch prey. On the ground, you will have ground beetles or spiders. And in the vegetation, you will have a ton of other insects that will actually actively seek their prey or host and kill them. Just quickly to talk about lygus bugs. So you all know what lygus bugs looks like. Ladybugs. You all know what the ladybugs look like, but there are many different species and many native species that are fairly small. And so I'd like you to have a quick look at that also. Okay, so most ladybugs are actually orange or red with dots on them, but there are many species that actually are hard to find, and they are just small black, and they are around. And so you see a small black beetle, so that's what it is. So we will start to talk about the ground beetles now, and all the ground insects. So Hector, do you want to say something about the ground insects?
Yeah, I guess ground beetles and spiders are kind of my pet insects, I guess, if there's such a thing. I actually did have one as a pet when I was a graduate student. My wife is actually afraid of insects, and she was quite happy to let me have this big Carcamo beetle in a pot until she found out I was feeding him caterpillars. Then I could no longer have it at home. Ground beetles is a common name that we use for the family Carabidae, but also for another big family of beetles called Staphylinnidae, or rogue beetles, and I think there will be some that will circulated. Row beetles are actually the most diverse family of beetles in Canada. If you look at worldwide, the weevils would be the most diverse family, but this family, Staphylini, the row beetles, are the one that have the most diversity, and it would be probably something like 3,000 species in Canada, at least for beetles. The Carcamo beetles, if you were to trap all of them, and the easier way to trap them, if you want to actually find out what you have there, is to put pitfall traps, which are just basically empty containers, like a 500 milliliter container, buried in the ground, put it flush with the surface, add a little bit of water and soap, or you could also use RV antifreeze. Do not use the regular antifreeze because it's toxic to animals. But the RV antifreeze works really well to preserve them, and you can actually collect a lot of ground beetles, and also, well, not just Carcamo beetles, but spiders and Staphylinis. And that will give you an idea of the diversity of these natural enemies that are native to your fields. And everybody in every field will have them, and we often don't realize that they're kind of working for us in the background, providing a great service for you, eating cutworms, eating the ligous bugs that are washed down by rain, doing all this great work for you, and all without any cost to us. You know, they never send you a bill in the mail for services provided for killing so many pests of your insects. Here is the bill. You know, they never send you a bill. They do it for you for free. So I guess the least we can do is kind of be kind to them, and if possible, only spray your fields if you really have to spray. And I think that's the number one thing that we can do to protect beneficial insects like Carcamo beetles and spiders, is to follow the economic thresholds, and if possible, maybe tolerate a little bit more feeding, because these beneficial ground beetles and spiders actually will help to keep them down and reduce them. There are maybe 300 species of Carcamo beetles in Alberta. Not all of them would occur in your farm, but you will have a high diversity of them. Some of them are only about 2 or 3 millimeters in size, and we will also find the biggest beetle that you can find in Alberta actually will be a Carcamo beetles. It's one that has a very fancy name called Passimachus elongatus, and it's one that is not very common in the agricultural field because it seems to not do well on the agriculture, but it's more common in grassland and undisturbed habitats. That will be probably over an inch in size and quite big. So there's quite a diversity of Carcamo beetles, and it's good to have this diversity because then you will have some that will feed on eggs. For example, we had a graduate student looking at pea leaf weevil, and these Bembidion Carcamo will actually feed on the eggs and help us to reduce pests that way. There are some that actually have the common name of caterpillar hunter, and there's one, the bigger one that you will see around there. That's not the biggest beetle in Alberta still. This Passimachus is bigger. This one is a Calosoma or Carcamo species, and their common name is caterpillar hunters, and some of them actually will climb plants and trees in search of caterpillars and eat them. So they are good things to have around. I guess we should appreciate them.
Thank you very much, Hector. So actually, I just handed you also some spiders. So spiders also, there are some that will hunt actively on the ground, so we call them wolf spiders, and some more in the vegetations. So the interesting thing is that we discovered not so long ago that even ground spiders will be able to climb on plants to feed on insects on the plant themselves. So the wolf spider is usually the type of spider that you find in your house, so they're fairly large, and they're very good hunter, and they are able to kill insects bigger than them. I've seen some eating some cutworms on the ground. It was hard to believe because the cutworm was so much bigger than the spider itself.
Can I say something? I'm sure it's in the back of your minds about what are the poisonous spiders. It's the very first thing people ask me when I said that I know something about spiders. All spiders really do have poison, but they are actually too smart to waste it on us. And for the vast majority, with one exception, the spiders we have here are not poisonous to us. The poison is toxic only if you're the size of a fly or another little spider, and they only really use it for catching those prey. There's only one species of spider that is actually a bit poisonous. It's the black widow, which is native to Alberta. Even something like the hobo spider, which we have found in Lethbridge and in many cities in Alberta, they really just have a really bad reputation, but it's not very well documented or proven that they're even poisonous and a risk to humans. So the vast majority of the spiders are are safe and helpful and beneficial.
Thank you. I also handed you harvestmen, so we also call them daddy long legs. Daddy long legs, sorry. So these are actually not quite spiders, and they don't have venom. They only have mandibules, and so they will tear their prey apart. So these will be very good at climbing on the plants and also hunting on the ground. So there is a urban myth that is that the harvestmen are poisonous, but that is not true. They can only give you a little bite. Really, if they are extremely hungry, otherwise it's perfectly safe to hold them. So talking about predatory insects.
Did you say daddy long legs isn't a true spider, did you say?
No, actually. So it's not a spider. It's like ticks or other mites and so on. So they are all acarids. But then there are different orders, so groups of organisms. And so the spider is one group, and the daddy long leg is part of another group, actually. Yeah.
Different orders.
Different order. So here I have some predatory bugs, as we call them. So Hector, can I hand those? And I will hand these to the right. Thank you. So the predatory bugs, so we call them bugs, actually same thing. So the connotation bug is, in entomology, it's a term applied to only a specific type of insect. So generally we call bug an insect, but not entomologists. So a bug in an entomological term is a type of insect that has a mouth part that is for sucking. So like lygus bugs, so it's like a straw, basically. So lygus bugs are a pest, and so these ones will pierce a plant stem and then suck the juice out of it. And so these beneficial bugs, they have a piercing mouth part as well, and they will pierce other insects or eggs. And so they will inject some enzyme inside of them, which will kind of liquefy their interior, and then suck it back. And so those bugs are very various. So here I handed you an ambush bug, which actually will hide in the vegetation, wait for a prey to come by. A damsel bug, so it's a very long and thin and gray bug, which will prey on other insects. There is quite a big diversity. There are even some minute, which we call minute pirate bug. So why we call them like that is because on their back, they have two white and black squares. It kind of looks like a pirate flag. And so these are absolutely minute bugs, so they are about 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter in length. They will actually pierce insect eggs or tiny larvae of insects and kill them. So here I like to say that size don't matter for beneficial insects, and this is true because even the smallest ones will be able to kill them right in the egg before they can actually do any damage at all.
I think my eyes are really gone, and so are Rob's, because we cannot see your pirate minute bug there.
Okay, so
Maybe it escaped.
it's possible that they were small enough to actually escape in some of the petri dishes. Yep, sorry for that. But I just saw some earlier, so I'm sure there are some circulating. So now we'll talk to you about syrphid flies. Okay. So the interesting thing about syrphid fly is that the larvae are predatory and the adults are pollinators. And they are amongst the most important pollinators you have in the field. So you have all the bees, which are very important, but you have all of those syrphid flies. So syrphid flies are also called hoverflies or flower flies, and so they will feed on pollen mainly. And so they're larvae of most species, so they will actually feed on aphids and also some other things. And so the larvae, they kind of lack any distinctive characteristic. It's like a cone, which is perfectly soft. You don't see any head or any leg or nothing. It's usually completely green or gray. And so this complete lack of characteristic is kind of the characteristic, actually. So they will be able to climb on the plant and seek for aphids everywhere. So then they will pupate. So it's like a cocoon stage before the adult stage. On the plant itself, on a leaf or on a stem, and the adult fly will come out, and then it will start to pollinate all the plants around. So here I put both the larvae and the adults in some of the petri dishes, because often we don't see them both at once, and it's really important to know what the larvae look like compared to the adult. And so there are some other predatory insects. Okay. You can hang those maybe. So these are predatory flies. So there are very many species of predatory flies, some that are big, some that are small. Here I gave you mainly one species, is actually what we call the dung fly. So the larvae will feed on dung. The adult is quite a big, yellow, fuzzy fly, and it will be a very voracious predator. Usually when we collect them in the field and we bring the samples back in the lab, so even in the sample bags or in the cages, they are hunting all over. So these are very voracious. So it's why I only put this one in the petri dish, so you don't see many different ones because they look extremely various. You have the dance flies, for example, which are very small and predatory. So usually predatory flies have fairly long legs and spiny legs. So this is one of the ways to recognize them. So they will be able to predate on flies like a root maggot adults, for example. So now I should start to talk about other things than predators. So, oh no, there is a last one I would like to talk first about. So this is the lacewing. So once again, I put both the larva and the adult in the same petri dish, so you can really see what both stages look like and associate them. Because once again, we rarely see both of them at once. So this is the larva, the small gray insect, and the green, actually it's quite pretty, it's a green lacewing, very membranous wings. So this is the adult stage. And so the larva is gray, it's kind of egg-shaped, and it's got two very big pincers on the front. So with those big pincers, it will actually grab some prey, inject some enzymes again, liquefy it, and suck it back. It does not have mandibules. It's like it's kind of like the predatory bugs actually. And so the adult will pollinate and also be a little bit predatory. So it's a good beneficial again. So now I will talk about parasitoids. So we talked a lot about predator right now. But there are also different categories of insects, the parasitoids. So these ones, it's mainly wasps and flies, but also some rove beetles and a few others. So what they will do, let's take, for example, a wasp parasitoid. I will hand them to you right now. Oh, it's fine. So this parasitoid, so the wasp, for example, so they will have a stinger. Only the females have a stinger. So this is true for every wasp or bee species. And so inside of this stinger, there are two tubes. So one is for laying egg, and the other one is for venom injection. So they will find the host, so it could be a caterpillar, for example, a cutworm, let's say, or a lygus bug. So it will sting it, inject some venom that can have different effects, like, for example, paralyzing the host or stop the host development, and inject one or many eggs. It depends on the species. So some will inject only one egg, some will inject multiple eggs. And so when this egg is injected inside of the host, it will hatch, and then the small larva of the parasitoid will start to feed on the blood of the insect. So it doesn't really damage the insect until it's big enough, and when it's big enough, it does not need the host anymore to live, so then it will eat the whole host, and so the host will then die. So then they will form a cocoon, and a few days later, the adult wasp will come out of this cocoon. Then it will need to feed on nectar and mate, and then it will seek for new hosts. So these are very good at controlling pests. And often what people tell me is, well, there is quite a big time between the initial parasitism of the host and when the host actually dies. Usually it's a few days to a few weeks. And so actually, parasitoids are quite diverse. So there are some that are extremely tiny, I don't know if you saw some, and some that are very big. So the ones that are very tiny, actually, they will be able to lay eggs inside of host eggs. So here the eggs will be killed right away. So the host won't even hatch, it will be dead. So for those that lay their eggs inside of mature hosts, like caterpillars, and they don't kill them until the caterpillar has done most of the damage. So here you really have to think long term, not short term. So it's very common to have cutworm population, for example. I work on cutworms, so of course I take the cutworm as the example. For example, cutworm population are fairly heavily parasitized, especially at the end of a cycle. And so if you think long term, these parasitoids will actually control the population of pests over the next year or few years to come. And so if you don't have these parasitoids in your field, then the pest population will only increase and not be controlled, while these insects will be able to control them under economic threshold over the long time. So that's the idea here mainly. We also have some fly parasitoids, which I will give you. So two main families. So the first one is called tachinid flies. And one way to recognize them is they have some long bristle at the tip of their butt, actually. And not very dense, but a few very long bristles. And usually their legs are fairly spiny. And most species are fairly big size. And we have a different families of fly parasitoids. So here I have two representative. So I was lucky to catch both of them. So we call them bee flies because they kind of look like bees or very big and fuzzy mosquitoes, but much bigger than mosquitoes. And so what these will do, so same thing, they will lay an egg either on top of the host body or beside it. And so since those are fly, the maggot will actually bore. The maggot, when it hatches, it will bore inside of the body of the host, and then it will feed on it and kill it. So these are not as neat as the wasp parasitoid because they don't care if the host dies before they are mature. They will feed on it, so maggots, it's what they do. Okay. Before I go any further, do you have any question about parasitoids? So this is one of the biggest and most diverse group of insects. Most of them are actually extremely tiny, you don't see them. So one of the main differences they have with the flies is that they have 4 wings instead of 2. So if you see a tiny thing, you may think it's a fruit fly. So just grab it, try to spread the wings. If you see 4 wings, then it's a wasp. And also most species, so the ones that are bigger than 1 or 2 millimeter long, they have fairly long antennae compared to the size of their body. So the antennae is about half of the size to the size or longer of the rest of the body. While flies, they usually have very short antennae. So before I continue, so I would like to wrap up with a demonstration of live predation. But before that, I would like to hand you some petri dishes. So if you can just scatter them. Cereal leaf beetle. Yeah. So in these petri dishes, so there is a cereal leaf beetle, which Hector will talk about it because he does some research on it, but also other insects. So those other insects include a soft-winged flower beetle. So I will talk about those first. So the soft-winged flower beetle is a predaceous insect. So it also feeds on pollen and some plant parts, but this does not make enough damage. It's more important as a beneficial. So it will grasp small caterpillars or small flies and eat them. So if you look carefully in the petri dishes I just gave, there are 3 or 4 insects which look very, very much like the cereal leaf beetle. So, and they are easily confused. People always confuse them, so have a very good look. A second insect in this petri dish is actually the wild buckwheat beetle, Gastrophysa polygoni. So this one is a native insect, but it didn't occur everywhere in North America, so actually people have spread it all over the place because it's a beneficial. So now it's everywhere, basically. So what this will do, it will feed on the wild buckwheat, which is quite a bad weed, actually. We also call it the morning glory. So it's a creeping plant, and it has heart-shaped leaves, and it makes some funnel-shaped flowers, which are very soft. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. So this beetle will actually feed on those, and it will also feed on ducks. So it's a very nice beetle to have around, and we often collect it in sweep sample. And this looks exactly pretty much like the cereal leaf beetle. One of the main differences is the cereal leaf beetle is long and narrow, while the wild buckwheat beetle is actually more round. Yeah. So Hector, you want to talk about the cereal leaf beetle?
More specifically, I'd like to talk about the Tetrasticus julis. So maybe we'll switch roles. Now you can pass this around. There are these tiny parasitoids there, and basically just want to take 30 seconds to give you a take-home punchline that there is a fact sheet now that we have prepared, and it's in this Farming Smarter website, right, Ken? Yeah. So if you visit the site, you will you can find this information, and essentially the message is that we have a very effective parasitoid that we're just circulating, and there's 2 vials there. This tiny wasp that goes by the long name of Tetrasticus julis, we just call it T. julis for short, is actually really good at following the cereal leaf beetle larvae. And in our region, we're now finding over 40% of the larvae are actually killed by this wasp. And again, I think over the long term, we expect to see a higher increase. In the Nelson Valley in British Columbia, where they've had these wasps for a longer time, they actually have 90% of the larvae are killed, so they can keep the cereal leaf beetle at low levels just by biological control. So this is kind of an important thing, and we have a project where we're relocating the wasp to fields that do not have it yet. They have found the cereal leaf beetle also in some areas in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, in northern and central Alberta. So we are sending T. julis wasps to those areas. Just wanted to make that kind of promo. One of the vials that I circulated also has Macroglenes penetrans, which is actually the parasitoid of the wheat midge, and that's kind of bad news. Yes, the wheat midge is in Alberta, and we have some fields. Has anybody encountered the wheat midge in their fields this year? No, that's good news. It appears to be abundant in the Claresholm area and in the Nanton region, so maybe keep an eye there. This time is obviously too late to do anything about it, but the good news is that the parasitoid, that tiny black wasp that is virtually indistinguishable from the T. julis, they look very, very similar. You actually have to look at it under a microscope to distinguish it. But the parasitoid is also very, very good and effective at finding the wheat midge. So that's kind of a good news story.
Thank you very much, Hector. So here we have some predators. I brought some extra beetles. So we will do a live demonstration of beetle eating caterpillars. So the caterpillars we have are alfalfa loopers. So this is a pest of canola and other cold crops. So maybe Hector will put a caterpillar with one beetle and circulate them. Oh, on the bottom there is a flower. Hopefully it's hungry. Well, out of the number, hopefully it's gonna work. Oh, yeah, you're right. Thanks. Oof, there are quite a few that cannot die. Oh well.
Now you have to watch it for the next 2 hours. Doesn't seem to be too keen on eating.
We'll start taking wagers on Farming Smarter's first cockfight. Being handed around over here. I think Kevin Zaitchuk's his little Elmo machine. We got to get this going on at one of the conferences. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, live
sponsor logos on their backs too.
So live demonstrations are often a bit of a challenge, so it doesn't always work, but it's nice when it does. So we will try, and well, if it works, good. If not, oh well. Oh yeah. You can. Oh, this one is actually eating. So here I have one that's eating the caterpillar. Oh, here I have a second one. Yeah. So let's see. Oh, this one not yet, but maybe it will. This one is not feeding yet, but maybe it will.
Yeah.
Okay, did we give them all away? Here there are a couple we can give some feeds to. Yeah, most of them died. We don't do too good in there. Eh? Yeah. No, yeah. Well, we can do that later. One or the other. Actually, here I have a ladybug that, yeah, it's eating an aphid.
Here's a ladybug.
So here we have some ground beetles that decided to feed on the caterpillars. I also put some aphids with ladybug larvae. So some of them are feeding already, so it's pretty nice. So you can see how quickly they can decide to feed when they encounter one of their prey. So if you look at ladybug larvae, very often what they do is they eat one. When it's done, they just walk a bit, eat another one, and then next they feed and again and again. So they can be very, very efficient at controlling those pests. Just before wrapping up, so I mentioned earlier that those parasitoids, so wasps and flies, so after they hatch from their cocoon, they need to feed actually. So most of them will feed on nectar, on flowers then. So you can imagine in a field, all of your crops will flower pretty much at the same time. But these will actually be around way before that. So if they don't have any source of food in that period of time, it's going to be a problem. So either they're going to die, either they're going to leave your field or not come into your field, or not parasitize their host pest in this field. So it's when it's kind of important to have a few flowers here and there in the field, so have a few weeds. So it will provide shelter for those beneficials, but also food. So I'm not saying that the field should be filled with weeds, but a few is a good thing. Yeah, thank you.